I think we'll get started. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Shadows Edge's second webinar. We thank you all for registering and joining us. Teens everywhere today are having their lives temporarily taken away from them. High school proms, graduations, social connections, sports activities, and anything that really signifies that they are becoming more independent is now basically on hold for them. And so we're here today to talk to Dr. Kristi Pikiewicz about what we can do for the teens and also how we can stay with teens in the house that are feeling cooped up and frustrated to help them through this period of crisis and make them feel emotionally more strong and healthy to deal with this. So welcome, Kristi, and if you could please just spend a little bit about yourself and a little bit time on your practice and what you do, just to set the scene.
Thank you so much. So I was a former middle school teacher, and I currently now work, I have my PhD in clinical psychology, and I currently work at a school and also seeing teens and their families in private practice as well. I'm also super fortunate to be part of the Shadows Edge community. I get to write pretty much bi-weekly blogs on our website. You can refer to them. And I don't know, I just love being a resource, and I actually love teenagers and I love preteens. So I'm pretty fortunate for where I work and how I get to work with them every day.
And you have some of that at home too, right? So some of this will be from personal experience.
Sorry, I think I froze up there for a second. Could you please repeat that?
I said, and you also have some of that at home. So you can also speak from personal experience on top of all your professional background.
I do. I get to be quarantined with my wonderful teenager, my 14-year-old son Leaf, and my preteen, my 12-year-old daughter Kestrel. So that's probably why my internet is slow. They're probably doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Right, so we're hearing that teens around the world are all battling the consequences of Corona, and they're fighting with their parents maybe, you know, they have to explain over and over again why they can't see their friends, why they can't go anywhere. Why do you think it is so hard for teens to accept this situation, even though it's really clear that it's temporary?
Right. Well, part of that is it's a teen's job to gently push against boundaries. So if you say no, or if you set up a boundary, it truly is their role. They are trying to figure out their own identity, and their own identity separate from their family of origin or the people who typically have power in their lives. So their job, their role is to gently push against any no, and that's okay. They can get mad, they can get frustrated. You can be there for them and love them and still hold that boundary and still try to keep them safe. It's okay for your child to be frustrated with you. It's okay for them to be angry with your decisions. And it doesn't mean that they love you any less or that you love them any less. So if you look at it as just a natural part of their own exploration of their identity in terms of pushing against you, it's actually a little bit more tolerable for both of you. It's their job.
Yeah, and speaking of their job and what comes natural to them, so I read somewhere that there's also some chemical processes happening in the brain when you're in that age stage that also mean that you're more receptive or less receptive to change. And can you speak a little bit about that, about, you know, what makes a teen and why is this period so important?
Right. So Dan Siegel has a wonderful book. It's called Brainstorm, and it looks at both the brain chemistry and also puberty and all the effects of the brain. So your brain, when you go through puberty, is absolutely getting a huge hit of some of those more fight or flight type of chemicals. So things like adrenaline, things like cortisol, which is a sort of a depressive. All of those pieces are happening and firing in the brain. So it's very important to understand that their emotions are amplified. So just like one of those old-fashioned stereos where you would turn up the volume, their volume, where it typically would be like, I don't know, like a 2 to 4, naturally, because of those chemicals, because of that process that's happening, is higher. So everything has to be held just a little bit more gently. And also remembering their responses, their reactions might be larger than they even anticipated. Now, the beautiful thing about the teen brain is some of the other stuff that's also happening. So just like in the early stages in life, the 0 to 5, when those neurons are making connections, those bridges are forming, as a teenager, bridges that formed when they were younger that they aren't using. So if they had exposure, for example, to French, and that early exposure wasn't reinforced between, let's say, age 3 to 4 and now as a teenager, that neural pathway will actually disappear so that other neural pathways that they use more frequently get faster. Those speeds become easier and those skills become more readily available for the teen. So this is an incredibly natural process, and it's also part of the reason why Dan Siegel named his book Brainstorm, because it's a storm of things happening. That's why teenagers do need to sleep more. Obviously, they need to eat more and take care of their bodies by drinking and staying hydrated, getting exercise. All of those things are incredibly important while their brain is going through this big adjustment or change.
And so you're naming all these good things that teenagers should be doing. Of course, a lot of those are now even trickier to do, especially if you think about, teens really just wanting to spend time with their friends. And if they can't do it outdoors, then they're most likely going to do it through playing games together or social media. And that means they're going to be even more sedentary and probably even up longer than before. So what would you give as advice to parents, how to deal with that or not deal with that, whatever makes most sense?
I love this question. So what I like to do is sort of, so the backbone of cognitive behavioral therapy is looking at the idea that your thoughts, how you're feeling, your emotions are directly impacted or linked with behaviors. So a really nice thing to do with your family, and have everyone do it, is list some things that you do when you're feeling good. So for me, I love to exercise. So if I'm actually feeling really good, I like to go for a longer hike. I like those prolonged exercises. I also really, if I'm feeling good, I like to do things like, I don't know, talk on the phone with my friends, all of those typical pieces. That's the first column. The second column is have your family members list things that they do when they're not feeling as good. So for me, that's binge watching really bad TV. I love really bad TV when I'm not feeling good. The problem is watching The Bachelor doesn't help me feel better. So that's when the third column comes in. The third column is what I really think is important for every family member to know about each other. What are things that help you feel better? So for me, I'm a horrible guitar player, but if I'm sitting there playing Musician, which is a silly app in my guitar, I may not go for it right away if I'm starting to feel low, if I'm starting to feel down. But if a family member could support me and say, hey, do you want to spend a little time playing the guitar? By the time I put the guitar down, I will be feeling better. So the same is true for teens. If you know things that will help them feel better, as a parent, as a guardian, as someone who cares about them, even as their peers, when you start to notice them getting sucked into those, like I said, for me, it's watching The Bachelor, sucked into those types of behaviors, encourage them to pick up the guitar, essentially. Encourage them to do some of those activities that would help them feel better. It's sort of that idea of fake it until you make it. So basically, we're quarantined together, but we can also support each other. So instead of just letting someone sit there and zone out in front of the TV or in front of their computer, try to encourage them to do those bridge activities so that they can feel better.
Okay. And what do you think is the difference in, like, let's say, early teens versus somebody who's just going off into college, into how they will be able to react to the situation or handle it, and what's different for parents in dealing with them?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think that speaks to, absolutely, there's differences in ages, as you were saying, because teenage years is a huge span. There's a difference in that teenage span in gender. There's a difference if you're looking at things like Myers-Briggs, if you're looking at introvert, extrovert. So I hate to say this, but it really is individual. If you want to get all growth mindset, we can say this is an opportunity, and I'm sorry, you all can kill me But it's an opportunity to get to know your teen, get to know yourself, and really spend some time on that relationship piece. So learn about your teen in terms of what's important to them. And be sure that if they share something that's important to them, and you might not agree. So for my own teen, Leaf, he loves video games. I just don't get it. I'm not interested in them. I think they waste a lot of time. I think when he's done with them, he gets a little bit grumpy. But if I really want to connect with him, I need to lean in and I need to share. I need to at least try to understand his interests so that he knows that, you know, if there's a bridge between us in this relationship, I'm willing to meet him halfway. So that is really important. Definitely, there are milestones based on ages, based on genders, but I really think the most important thing is to really focus on your own individual teen, your own young adult that is presenting themselves to you, and try to focus on those pieces and thinking about your relationship. Remember, there's no academic work, there's no anything that's more important than your relationship. So if you find yourself constantly fighting about specific things, try to step back. This is a time to build and to reinforce those relationships. They're so key.
So I understand that it's obviously every person is different, right? Everybody has their own preferences, but what do you think are the most important things that teens may be struggling with at the moment? What are the things that they may have, you know, FOMO about, fear of missing out about most, if you will?
Oh, that's a really great question. And it's so interesting too, whenever I look at the New York Times in the morning and they have pictures of people all over the world. And it is so interesting to see how everybody is experiencing this so differently. So the first thing you always want to do is, you know, ask that question to your teen, see what their response is. A big piece of this, so the whole lifespan, if we're to go to Erickson's model, the 12 to 18-year-old section is really about identity versus role confusion. Now, the reason why that's important is because teenagers, well, let's start a little younger. So if you use the movie Inside Out, people build these islands of personality based on, in the movie, their core memories. So you might have a family island, you might have, in the movie they had Hockey Island. As you move into the teenage years, some of those islands that used to be important to you, so for my daughter, her stuffed animals, sort of crumbles away and isn't as important. And she's building new ones now. So things like friendships. So what's really important is that the teenagers who have islands, so let's say Friendship Island, and it's not getting as much power right now because she's not able to connect with her friends face to face. She's not able to run around at recess and play and have fun and laugh with her friends. So it's really important to acknowledge that grief. You were saying fear of missing out, this sadness about the parts of that part of her personality that aren't getting the energy, aren't getting the attention. And that truly is grief. It's hard, it's sad. It's really, really, really difficult. And it's not something that can easily just be changed by simply doing something like Zoom, because it is very different. So trying to fix it won't always work. So my best advice, and I know this isn't very good in terms of fear of missing out, is to allow your child to grieve, allow your child to sink into the sadness of the parts of things that they're missing, whether it's prom, whether it's, you know, if they're a soccer player, their soccer season for the summer may have been canceled. All of those major pieces of who they are, their identity, we have to be sad. We have to be willing to sit with that sadness. And the hope would be, as we move through this, we're learning different things about ourselves. So my guitar is a funny example, but maybe I want to focus a little bit of attention and love there. So I could almost build a new island. And by the time we're getting out of all of this or things settle down, maybe, you know, my soccer island will be going again. And now I'll have a new one. I'll have a guitar island. So my best advice in terms of fear of missing out is to allow your child to be sad, allow them to be really angry, be really frustrated, however they're feeling about prom or whatever they're missing, and then try to see if we can move on, try to see what that will look like now, that things are so different.
So with this, you already partly answered one of our audience questions, actually, because we had from the audience sent in some questions beforehand. And so the question there was, what do we have helpful advice for someone who might be experiencing depression around, missing graduation ceremony, prom, etc. But also it goes a little bit further. It's not just the big events. So she's also asking, what about the day-to-day stuff? How it relates to depression. How do you see that happening? How do you notice that in your teens, and what can you do around that? Maybe some practical advice.
Right. So both depression and anxiety, some of those pieces. So a lot of that is our own body, our own way of reacting when we are experiencing something big. The key piece here, and this is different in the United States, I think, from my limited understanding, depression is a little bit longer lasting, and it tends to be sort of a state of being. So for example, if someone has a partner, if someone has a friend, a close relative who passes away, who dies, obviously they're going to feel extreme amounts of grief, extreme amounts of sadness, a lot of loss, a lot of anger, frustration, whatever they're feeling, the full range. And that necessarily isn't depression, if that makes sense. It is a response, a completely normal, healthy, typical response to a very trying situation. So if your family, if the child, if you do have a history of depression, do have a history of anxiety, absolutely, in terms of trying to support and be there, making sure you're reaching out to healthcare professionals as needed, getting those outside supports is incredibly important. But I do think it's important that we all recognize that this is a stressful, high anxiety, difficult time where the child, the adult may be feeling a lot of grief and sadness, and that's okay. It's not necessarily something we want to fix with a pill. It might be something that we have to experience as a society, as a family together. And then if it is prolonged, that's when we want to start talking to healthcare professionals.
Okay, thank you. We have a follow-up question also from Audrey, along with, in similar lines, who's asking, what advice do you have for a teen who is angry with increased behavioral aggression and outbursts? So somebody who refuses to approach the sadness of what is occurring or the grief of what they're going through.
I was just putting my dog in the back room. You're going to hear some sadness from a beagle in just a few seconds. So let me wrap my head around that. Just like we said before, behaviors are absolutely a way for adults, for teenagers, for all of us to express how we're feeling. So whenever someone is showing you how they're feeling through behaviors, it's really important that you try to help them label that emotion, to recognize it, to see it. So what that would look like, when you're feeling or you're seeing someone experiencing a big emotion, soothe them, pull them in, try to do your best to get them into that 0 to 5, that calmer range. Once they are calmer, you start to label it. I noticed you, kicked your door in. Wow, that must have been really hard. How are you doing now? What's happening for you? Gosh, it looked like you're really angry. Does that sound right? The goal is that you can start to have teenagers start to recognize how they're feeling. So label it, I'm feeling blank, and then start to reason why. Because I am not getting to go to prom. And then hopefully they'll be able to tell you what they need. Right now, I need to just spend some time, on the phone with my friends, or I need to, do different things. So the hope is that you'll get the young adult to be able to say, I'm feeling blank because I blank, I need to, and then express. So at first, when they're just simply showing you the behaviors, you try to help them with that labeling process until hopefully they can start to do it themselves.
Okay. So We see a lot of initiatives, online, obviously, all kinds of stuff where people are really creative in this period in what they're trying to do, and what they're doing to make the best of the situation. But what if your teen resists that? What if your teen resists, finding all these fun activities and social things at home? And what can you do as a parent?
Yeah, well, it's
Or asking differently, what are some ways that you can support them when all they seem to want to do is hang out in their bedroom?
absolutely. That's something I'm laughing a little bit because it's something I go through all the time at my own house for sure. So in my own house, I have something that's called forced family fun. And just like we talked about teens pushing against boundaries and having that be typical and absolutely appropriate, as a parent, it's absolutely appropriate for you to also say, this is the minimum expectation in terms of you living here, in terms of you staying healthy, and I'm going to insist that you do that. So at my house, we have things like 3 points for exercise. So on any given day, you have to do 3 things that are good for your body. And that could be something as simple as resting if you're tired, or drinking some water during the middle of the day so you don't forget. Hopefully that also means for my teenager, getting outside, walking the dogs, doing yoga, getting out there and trying to do some climbing or something more active like biking. So it's absolutely appropriate as an adult for you to simply say, this is what I need you to do, and I need you to do it within this time frame. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that you're a part of this family and you're doing this. So really complimenting them as well, but asking for some bare minimum pieces in terms of keeping their mental health and physical health are incredibly important and absolutely appropriate for you to reinforce as the adult.
Well, you say reinforce, but I mean, you can't very well really send them to the bedroom and ground them, right? Because in fact, they're already grounded. So how do you deal with that? And what if they don't do it?
Oh my goodness. I would have loved to meet you as a teenager. I bet you were very fun. I was very similar. um, so, would that have worked for me as a teenager? No. Does it work for my own kids? Sometimes at best. So there's always the reward, the carrot and the stick idea. So you're absolutely right. Some of our consequences because of our current situation have been taken away. So the typical one around grounding, removing some privileges, obviously, maybe some of that is limited. Also, some of the rewards may be a little bit more limited. So you might not be able to allow them to go over a friend's house for an extended period of time. Perhaps, going to a summer camp that they were wanting to do. You can't offer that as a reward. Does this mean that those things, rewards and punishments, are totally out of the ballgame? No, you can still get more creative with it. So for my family, for today exactly, I was trying to encourage my daughter Kestrel to do a little bit of exercising. She went online with a friend and they found this game. It's a scary game. You move through zombies. I don't know. And it's typically something I would say no to. In fact, when I did see it, I said no to it. And this was 2 days ago. When I was talking to her today, she was saying she was feeling low motivation. She said the same thing yesterday and the day before. So I talked to her and I said, I heard you say that you wanted that game. Initially, it's not something I really like or, would want to encourage you to do. But because I think it will help right now, what if you do, and I gave her a very set amount of physical work, what if you do this? And if you do, we can pull the game up again and hopefully I'll look at it with new eyes and try to see if there's a way that we could figure something out that will work with our family. So again, that's not something I would ever typically offer as a reward for my kids because again, I'm not really into things like video games, but it was important enough to her that she immediately stood up and immediately got motivated. And the wonderful thing about things like exercise is they do release dopamine, they do release endorphins. So she actually went above and beyond what I asked her to do, and she's actually having a much better morning because of it. So she did need that little bit of a carrot, but now things have really shifted. So it's hard. I'm not saying there's an easy answer.
So we're making a lot of space to show disappointments and validating their emotions, but how long is too long?
Wow, Great question. So essentially, we want our young adults, we want to create wonderful humans who can self-regulate. So what that means is initially, especially for something that had a huge kind of out of nowhere impact on their life, they might need more help self-regulating. So that's people who are showing you with those big behaviors, those big anger outbursts, the big sadness outbursts, even using words like "that's not fair." If they sound like they're a little bit younger, so regression, those types of pieces are kids who we have to lean into and sort of help them self-soothe, help get that dial back to that, 3 to 5 range so that they're not operating, they're not so revved up essentially. Now, the wonderful thing is we also need to help them and encourage them to be able to self-soothe on their own. So when they do move off and go on to college, they do move away from you. If they have something that was really big or devastating to their world, they're able to understand that they can cope, that they can get through this. They have some resources. They know how to take care of themselves when they're stressed. So what we're trying to do is soothe when they're showing us through big emotions that they need help. They need you to lean in. So if someone's screaming at you and slams the door in your face, they actually need you more than ever, which doesn't seem really counterintuitive. Having said that, as they're sort of starting to move through their day with their new normal, it is really important that you let children self-soothe. Let them be upset and step away and just watch, see what they need, see what they see, if they're getting bigger in emotion or if they're actually ratcheting down, if they're able to self-soothe. If they're getting bigger, you can get in and get closer and try to help them. If they're starting to self-soothe, that's actually wonderful. So it's sort of a yo-yo, like you want to be there when they need you, and then you also want to give them opportunity to calm themselves as well. So it's a little bit playing game.
So you're saying, self-soothing and recognize, but how do I really recognize the types of emotion that my teen goes through, like anger, fear, obvious things are tears or tantrums, but what if it's not that obvious? How do I get them to say what is wrong with them or what they feel, and how do I recognize it even that I need to talk to them?
Right. So the big picture piece is a lot of people want to figure out the why. So I have several students, for example, who are having panic attacks. They're waking up in the middle of the night and they are just having really, really big emotions. And a lot of families are trying to figure out, like, why are they having this? And there's not always a lot of traction, or you can't always accomplish a ton if you're always digging in on the why or the trigger. Sometimes what you simply have to do is soothe the emotion and allow it to calm, allow your body to get back regulated. So then you can start to explore those triggers together once everyone is calm. So triggers are very important. So obviously there's going to be triggers like missing prom, missing graduation. Those are very obvious ones. But there are day-to-day triggers too, like missing, going out to lunch if you're in high school, leaving the campus and going to, Del Taco or wherever you go for lunch. So actually missing something as simple as that burrito and not being able to recreate it at home is huge to this teen. And maybe they don't even realize it, but every day around noon, they get a little grumpy. So at first you just sort of lean in, you're like, yeah, you're grumpy. Okay, so let's just hang out. We'll read together. We don't even have to talk. Okay, let's play with this. Can you help me learn this song here on the guitar? I can't quite get this chord right. And then you start to sort of play with it after, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Gosh, I wonder why it's always so hard around noon. You start to notice those triggering patterns. And then hopefully they'll come to the awareness with your help and with your modeling what exactly was triggering them about, for example, that time period. Now, the beautiful thing is as a parent, can you imagine how much it would feel so good? It would fill your bucket as a teenager if your family member then tried to recreate that Del Taco burrito. So again, it's just those opportunities to lean in and to say, I know this was important to you, and it might sound silly to someone else, but that Del Taco burrito is really important. And I Googled the recipe and I tried to recreate it, and it's probably really bad, but here you go, honey. So again, you're just trying to recognize what's important to them, care about what's important to them, realize that it is important, And then, just show them how much you love them and how much you care. It'll go a long way. Not always perfectly, though.
So another question that came up from the audience is, how do you spot paranoia around like symptoms with teens? Because a lot of times, obviously, when a teen gets a little bit of sick, immediately they can't go to school because it's a huge deal. So now we have an actual pandemic. How do you spot those, and how can you help with calming that down?
Yeah, so that's more on the anxiety side of things, and absolutely a completely normal, completely reasonable reaction to the stimulus that's happening right now. So the piece there is also, it kind of joins like this in terms of the access to information. And what I mean by that is, in a perfect world, we would figure out a way to, like a colander, be able to give news information that is age appropriate to our teens. Because of the internet and access, kids are getting bombarded with so much information, and a lot of really scary information that they're having trouble processing. So when you hear things like these big anxiety reactions, insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night, night terrors, panic attacks, you were talking about paranoia, and essentially taking a stimulus and blowing it really, really big is their way of saying, I have some information, I have some stuff going on for me that I don't know how to metabolize, I don't know how to process, and I need your help. So my first step as an adult would always be to start to limit their access. So start to figure out where they're getting that stimulation, where they're getting that either information or whatever, like bombardment that they're needing support with. Once you reduce the input, hopefully then you can start to help them unpack what is already within them. So what have you been reading lately? Right before you go to bed, what used to work for you and what has changed? What can we do in terms of trying to bridge what was different now? So once you start to limit their input, you can start to help them digest what they already have going on for them. The time to be really worried, the time to really start to think about leaning in and calling some outside community support. Obviously, if your teen's not eating well, if they're not sleeping well, those things are critical in terms of maintaining healthy mental health and obviously physical health. Also, when you started to talk about paranoia, so the lack of reality testing. So it's really, really a tricky but fine balance when you start to talk about reality testing. So is what they're saying real? It's a little bit hard, but if your gut is really scared, if what they're telling you, just something about it doesn't feel okay to you, reach out to a physician, reach out to a therapist, get some outside help or support, because they might be getting so overwhelmed that they actually need someone in the community to help them unpack the material outside of the family system.
And that's actually a good segue into the next question that also came from the audience. How do I not fight with my team when now they're even more emotionally charged than usual?
Yeah, this sounds really, I don't mean this to be simplistic, but it helps me. So again, there are certain things that both my teenage son and daughter, I have a difficult time with. So what I always try to keep in the back of my mind is that whatever I focus on will magnify. So if I focus on the fact that my son, for some reason, doesn't like washing his face, I don't know why. If I focus on that, it will drive me crazy because it seems so simple and such a small, healthy thing to do that I just don't get why he doesn't do it. And it will not only cause friction and cause us to fight, but he'll sense that disappointment. He'll feel that unhappiness that is happening within me. And we'll just get into this pattern where the whole day, that small little seed of a fight will bloom in all kinds of different places. If he doesn't put his dish away, if he asks for a glass of water and he's standing right next to the sink or whatever. So instead, what I try to do is when I feel myself focusing in on something that kind of gets under my skin, I really try to pull back and I try to focus in on something else. Because my son is also incredibly kind. He's incredibly loving. And I've seen that a million different ways that he interacts with his sister and with other people, his friends, his community members. So instead of focusing on the seed that's going to give us many multiple fights throughout the day, I really try to focus my magnifying glass on something that I'm really proud of. And he'll start to feel that too, and he will shift as well. And he'll shift closer to that magnifying glass and away from the others as well. So it has to be a conscious choice, first on the adult's part, and then hopefully the child will follow you. But you as an adult really have to make a conscious decision on what you're focusing on.
Okay. And how do different family dynamics impact the situation? Like, let's say, we've got so many blended families, maybe some of them are not even living together and not being able to see each other, or, does adoption or families going through divorce, does that have a different impact at the moment? And what can you do in those situations? I think you froze there for a second again. Let's give it a second.
Working for you.
Yeah, you're back. Did you hear the question?
Okay, so I did. When you were talking about blended families and long-term family relationships and family roles, absolutely. So you're about to hear me remind my son, oh, he's not on the internet. That's kind of funny. Anyway, so I absolutely think that that is something huge that's coming up for a lot of people, because we're not able to get a break. We're not able to separate. So we're sort of living in our soup all day, every day, 24/7. Is it an opportunity to focus in and really say, like, is this the role I want to have in this relationship? Is this, how I want to move forward? Is this, at the end of all of this, how I want to come out of my house? Yes, it is an opportunity for those pieces, but that does mean that you have to put in the work. You have to start to label it. And by labeling it, you have to have those hard conversations with your partner, with your children, with your parents, whatever relationships you want to work on. You have to start by labeling. Gosh, every time we need the kids to, do the housework and get ready for bed, it seems like I'm the only one reminding them, and I feel like a real nag. I don't like that. I don't like that role in this family system or in this relationship, and I need your help as other family members to make it so that I'm not in that role anymore, because it really doesn't feel good to me. So you really have to start by labeling it, asking for support, asking for help among your family members, among other people in the relationship, being very concrete. So what I need you to do is at 6 o'clock, I honestly need you to do the dishes. And I don't want to remind you. I'll set an alarm, you'll hear the alarm, and then I need you to just do that. So sort of setting those expectations to help back you out of that role. And then you have to follow through. When the alarm happens and they're not immediately at the dishes, you can't nag because you're just stepping right back into that role. So you also have to meet halfway. You have to figure out a way to back yourself out of things that aren't healthy or aren't working for you anymore. This is hard work though. So you have to consciously decide if you want to put the time, the energy, the love, the effort into that work. Or if you'd rather, if you don't have that mental space right now, that's okay too. But hopefully at some point you do, because I do think there's a lot of wonderful growth that could come from it.
So speaking of growth that will come from it, what do you think we'll go through once this lockdown has been lifted a little bit? Because we're talking around the world, about lockdowns changing. Here, for example, we have like a step process, but since yesterday, a lot of stuff has already opened up again. So as life starts to slowly return to normal, what do you think is the emotional impact on young people for that? And what can we see happen and recognize?
Right. I don't know if anyone really knows. I do think it's an interesting time to do things like child studies, to really talk to your teen or your preteen in a very real way about what are they experiencing? What is this like for you? How do you think this has changed you, if it has or if it hasn't? How has it changed our relationship? What pieces do we want to take that actually worked during this time that now that things are opening up, we want to apply later? So I don't know if anyone has concrete answers on that exactly. However, I do think that if you just sort of step back into the life that you had before, you might find that the shoes don't fit so well anymore because you have changed. The experience has changed you potentially in some way. So allowing yourself, allowing your team to reflect on that, be very conscious about that, and decide, do I want to keep going in this direction or do I want to choose to go in this direction? So being very conscious about your choices as some more of those freedoms are opening up to you, I think are going to be really amazing. Here's a quick story that goes along this way. So I was teaching a 6th grade class this week, and we were talking about some of what we were talking about before with those islands of personality. And I was asking the students, I was saying, so knowing that identity formation is so important right now as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, which islands of your personality, now that we're, safe at home here, have really changed, have gotten more energy, gotten less energy, or how have they changed? Or are there any islands that you really miss that are completely dark and, it's really difficult? And I was expecting a lot of, anger, grief, big emotion. And the 12 and 13-year-olds were so flexible. They're like, yeah, I used to love to draw anime with this certain group of friends after school, and we can't get together anymore, but we still draw, and then we show each other, we text each other pictures, and that's fine because it works. And even really hard things like soccer being canceled for the season, they were able to adapt. Their brains are so malleable, so flexible, that with the right attitude, these kids actually were able to push through some really difficult things. So I was shocked. You said, what are the long-term impacts? I thought these particular group of kids were going to have huge, emotional reactions over some of these topics, and they were actually incredibly flexible about it. So I actually think teenagers, children, their brains are incredibly malleable. So if we just believe in them, if we stand behind them, I think they're going to come out of this okay. That's my prediction.
And people say that we will have waves of this coming up and down, and Corona coming back, and then lockdown coming back and going away again. And there's also the economic impact that goes up and down. So how do you think, what can we do to make that easier for teens? Let's say they go out and then finally they're able to do their things again, and then it shuts down again. What do you think that situation will be like?
I think there are 2 things that can be helpful. One is try not to make any promises. So that idea of like, oh, we had to cancel our summer vacation, but don't worry, we're going to do something super special over the holiday break or in January. Don't make a promise like that because we don't know if we can or can't keep it. And multiple promises that get kind of broken from their point of view definitely erode trust and erode the relationship. So instead of making a big grand promise or gesture, just be very honest with them and say, I'm really sorry that we can't visit Grandma and Grandpa over summer. I know we're really excited about that trip. My hope is that we can do it in December. I can't guarantee that either, and I'm really sorry, but I'm really committed to that. I really want to make that work too because I miss them, and I really want to see them as well. And we're in this together. So if we can't make it in December, we've got this. We can figure it out. The wonderful message, so the first step is not to make any promises. The second piece is that bigger message of we're in this together. If there's a difficult situation, we can handle it. You can handle it is a wonderful gift to instill, to give to anyone, whether it's an adult, a teenager, a child. So this idea of we're going through something hard, but we can do it. We've been through something hard before, and we can do something hard again. That's actually a huge gift to give to someone. And so speaking in those bigger general terms of we've got this is actually a beautiful gift, but be careful not to make those promises because that will erode trust. And it's not your fault, but that's not how it will be perceived necessarily or seen by the teenager.
Do you think there are any positive opportunities in general for teen emotional health that could come out of this whole situation?
I hate to be the eternal optimist. I used to work for a company called Outward Bound here in Colorado. And one of the reasons why I used to work for Outward Bound is because I loved young adults as they came out of these 30 days in the wilderness. You know, as we reflected in a circle, people being like, I had no idea I could do this. I had no idea I was strong enough for this. I had no idea I could figure this out, or I could last this long. You know, I could give myself goosebumps, but that's exactly what I want for everyone coming out of this situation, especially young adults. I want them to see themselves as strong, as capable, as able to handle difficult situations. To me, that is such a gift, and it is the true opportunity here, along with those relationship building pieces. So if we can let go of some of our day-to-day stress and really focus on the people that matter to you, the relationships that matter to you, and really putting some magnified, focused and love and attention on those, that could be another beautiful opportunity coming out of this, I think, for everyone.
Right, so we're almost up with our questions and with our time. So at this point, also a shout out, if anybody in the audience has a question, then feel free to pose that here. One other question is, what do I not say to my team? You know, what are things that I should avoid?
Oh, probably 90% of what I say to my teen every day. So first, forgive yourself. We all are going to make mistakes. And I think the biggest piece is if you do say something and it was harsher than you meant, if it wasn't experienced as feeling kind to the teen or to your partner, forgive yourself and just own it. Gosh, I'm really sorry I said it with that tone of voice. I was frustrated because of an earlier call. It really didn't have a lot to do with you, and I'm really sorry. So owning any mistakes is huge. I think the other big piece in terms of, again, so that you don't step into it, is recognizing what's important to them and not belittling it. So even if it's something that's very different than your belief system, than who you thought your teen might, you know, slowly become, recognize that they're just trying to figure this out. So right now they might have a lot of passion, a lot of interest in a certain friendship, in a certain activity, in a certain thing. And for you, it's like, I don't get it. And that's okay for you not to get it, but you can't belittle it. So I think leaning in and showing them that even though this particular passion isn't a passion you share, you love them so much that you're going to sit there and watch them play Minecraft one more time. And I know kids aren't really playing as much Minecraft, but do you know what I mean? Like you love them and every part of them. And the beautiful thing is then they'll start to hopefully love those, you know, less comfortable bits of themselves as well. So don't belittle, I think, is my biggest advice on that end.
Yeah, I have quite some teens as nephews and nieces, and I play video games online with one of my nieces, which is a good way for us to stay connected through this whole thing. And she says, well, whatever you do, you know, stop telling me it's only for a few weeks. I don't know what you're worrying about. This is apparently something that my sister says to her, and it just completely just freaks her out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's so hard because, you know, on one hand, especially with younger children, where a day can feel like forever, it's so difficult because you do want them to see that this isn't going to be forever, but we just can't make any absolutes. It's really hard that way.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Because otherwise, I would say we'll do a little bit of a demo of Shadow's Edge and just pull up some of the things related to some of the topics we've just now talked about and how, you know, a game maybe can help. And you're happy, I'm happy for you to pitch in when I click around, of course, as well. But is there anything just in general that you would give as a, you know, famous last words of advice?
I guess one quick piece of what I most have fallen in love with in terms of Shadow's Edge and in terms of the opportunity it provides to teenagers is it allows, well, first, the world changes, and you'll see that in just a moment, as they move through different stages and different emotions. And I love that things aren't constant. I think that's really important for teenagers to see that growth, to see that you're in this place now and it will change. And we talked about this before, but especially in times like this, Shadow's Edge and other games, whether it's Minecraft or whatnot, are such an important way for kids, for young adults to connect. And those connections really are a critical part of their identity, of their development right now. So even if it's something that you might not have as a passion, it's really important to provide these opportunities for your teenagers because it is absolutely important to them.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Go to sharing. And again, feel free to pitch in if there's something that you want to highlight, obviously. So this is the game Shadow's Edge that we've created, and some of our listeners may already know about the game. But we, since COVID started happening, we had a lot of questions from people about, you know, how can the game help with things like isolation, fear of missing out, anxiety, things that relate to the current situation, and how can the game help also clarify certain things, so give some wisdoms. And so I just wanted to talk through, this is only going to take like 3-4 minutes. Just wanted to talk through a few of the things with Shadow's Edge. So if you have never seen the game, Shadow's Edge is a city that's been hit by a storm. And of course, the world is now, as you can see, completely out of whack. The streets are all empty. So there's a lot of parallels to what is happening in our world today. And your quest when you come in is to help this character, and we call them the Guardian, that has been stuck in the elevator when the storm hit, and basically now needs your help to revive the city. And you do that by finding the pages of a missing journal that have been scattered all around town. So for example, we've got a page here, and there, as you can see, a lot of the content, a lot of the questions, the self-help questions that we have are questions that you might be asked, you know, also in a professional setting around therapy, or when you are doing self-help exercises before and in between therapy, and you can answer anything in here, for example. You can also speak into it. You can just add that to your journal. I'm just doing a very, very short one. But as you do that, it actually has an impact on your world. And I think that's maybe also a good metaphor, Kristi, that whatever you do in this situation, it will still impact your world, how you behave and how you, you know, the friendships you make now and what you do with your family now, that still impacts your world. And so we try to bring those types of metaphors into it as well, and have pivoted some of the content in the recent weeks to really mirror what's going on. As you then start leveling up, so the more pages you find, the more you write, the more the city comes back to life, so you have an impact on the world, but also you level up. And the more you level up, the more things change. So you can see, for example, now the character has changed. This is more the stage, I think, that we're in quite now, where we're thinking, okay, this has been going on forever, right? When is this ever going to stop? Will it still be the same? So there's a lot of doubt and fear, you know, and questions about what you're going through and how that will affect your life. And you can see in the game as well, there's different areas. So if you go to a different part of the city, then that represents also things that people are going through. And by the way, we have a sharing platform in the game. So if I wanted to take a picture of something that I've drawn, I can do that. And I can actually share that with others. So I can take a picture of this, for example. I can move it around a little bit and add some stuff to it. And then I can add a comment with it. I can share that. I'm not going to do that now. That's not fair to the other players to have us be the ones sharing. But I can see that other people share here too. And again, I think this is something that's pertinent to the situation right now, where a lot of young folks feel isolated. And here they can, you know, they can vent, they can really talk about things that they feel insecure about. They can get creative and do something different. And if I then, for example, really like something that they've drawn, I can then say, I love this, or give different ones. They can share it outside, so they can share it on their own social media if they want, or they can save it. There's also, you know, a lot of different types of fonts and everything that they can use to create graffiti in the game. And if I have then favorited some stuff, then it shows up in my feed, so I can really go back to those and look at those again. And obviously I can keep loading, and then there'll be more that shows up. I find it really extraordinary in the last couple of weeks to just see what these young people come up with, you know, what kind of drawings they make, but also just really the experiences they have, and a lot more stuff that they come up with also in the comments that they make, where they're now starting to explain why they're making this art. And it seems much more important to them now that other people understand why they're creating what they're doing. Is that something that you're seeing as well, Kristi?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't nod anymore. I think to be seen and to be understood is such a gift. And oftentimes it's a gift that students, young adults need a platform like this to be able to do. So to be seen by their family, to be understood by their family, and then also to put a very soft part of themselves out there and to be seen and understood and validated is so critical in terms of that identity formation. So this is definitely just such a gift for young adults.
And we see that as they start moving through their world as well, there's certain wisdoms that you can find. So there's these pigeons we've hidden around town, and they will, come up with questions and things that you can do, techniques, sort of exercises here. So the point of the game is not to get them away and to distract them, basically, or to have yet another game, that they can just play for 20 hours and just get lost in. But really it is to dig deep into what you're going through at this moment and really think about that, to reflect upon it, and then to really try and understand what you're going through and why, because that's, as you said before, I think is really important at the moment to learn from this as well and learn how you are affected by what is happening around you. Is that a good summary of some of the things that you said?
Oh, absolutely. And that is absolutely what makes this unique. Is it basically is therapy, but it's therapy in their own schedule, in their own time, as they need and want it. So in such a wonderful, wonderful way, it's available to them in perhaps a way that it's hard for people in their own family to be available to them. So yes,
So
I'm looking at all the things you're showing. These are so cool. Look at what people have done. Wow.
That's not me. I can't draw, so I'm using somebody else's demo at the moment. But I've just been moving through this a little bit, so to show kind of what it looks like in the different phases. So as you start moving through these phases, you can see that here the streets are still empty, but things are just kind of more grown over. You can see further, you can get up further, meaning that there's more light into the situation. And I think that's also something that teens resonate with as well at the moment, where it's bleak, but you have these glimpses of hope and these glimpses of being farsighted. And if they want to come back, then they can always come back to the pages that they found, the journal pages. They can go through here. I see that here, for example, I found this page, and obviously I haven't collected my reward for it yet, which helps me level up. But I can see that whatever I do has an impact on the world and what I work with. And I think if we can give them a little bit of impact, possibility of what they're going through now, that might be really helpful. Anything else you want to say? Because otherwise I think we're through. So I'm just double checking if there's any more questions from anybody. Is there anything about the game itself that you would point out that could be really helpful at the moment?
Yes, I see that someone in the chat room asked if how to approach their teens to play this game because they're usually resistant to suggestions. I love that question. So I would talk about enlisting some of the outside supports you might have. So whether it's so introducing or sharing it with like a lot of schools, teachers, things like that, so that the teacher could then say, hey, I found this really cool thing. That's when you try to find that really fun uncle to offer it up, because you're absolutely right. It's sometimes hard for a teenager to not want to gently rebel or push against parent suggestions. So reaching out to community members, coaches, people who could influence your teen in a positive way and help share some of these resources would be a great idea.
Yeah, and I think, seeing as a lot of the content that we have in the game actually really, really applies to this COVID situation, maybe it's one of those activities that you mentioned that you could do jointly, where you say, okay, look, I found this game, I like this. Do you want to try it together, and maybe we create something together? Because one of the things with the graffiti and with the drawing also is it's based on narrative therapy and artistic expression, so it has certain elements of psychology in there, but it's also a lot of fun maybe to create together and to create something really strange that you can then show in your world or even share with others.
Absolutely. And plus it's a free resource, which I think is amazing. The idea that teens anywhere, if you have access, to, to the app, etc. It's totally free. So I love that about this, that anyone can be doing it with, and keeping themselves mentally healthy during this time.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Kristi. And it was really, I love that there was a lot of really down-to-earth practical advice, which sometimes can be so hard to get. I think there's so many lists out there now, of things to do, and it can be quite overwhelming, not just for teens, but also for parents and for me as an aunt, for example, as well, right? Because they all run to me as you say, the cool aunt. So what does she do? And I think that was really, really helpful. We will follow up here with an email that shows some resources as well, that share some of the stuff that we talked about, some of those tips and tricks. And if you do want to sign up for more of these webinars, we'll be doing one a month. Always trying to be really actual in, what the situation is, and really making sure we focus on what's going on around us. So, please join us again, sign up for a newsletter on the website, and then you'll know whenever we have webinars, and you can register for them. So thank you everybody for being here. I know there's tons of webinars out there, and a lot of people get zoomed out. So I'm very happy that you zoomed in with us, and also very thankful, Amy and others, for all the questions that you sent in ahead of time, and all the comments that you made here. Have a good day.